So chapter 23, Fire Rises. This is another chapter where most of it we don't have to read together. It would be faster if you read it on your own, just with your eyes. So I want you to start reading from there was a change on the village, so the first sentence. And then I want you to read up until not only that. Okay? So you start reading chapter 23, Fire Rises. See it there. Okay, start reading from the first sentence, good, and then in my copy, one, two, three, four, five, six. So it's approximately like 7 pages, okay? And then we'll start reading, and not only that, but the village, lightheaded with famine, fire, and bell ringing, okay? So you can pause this video, read until you reach not only that. So pause the video, read that, and then come back here. All right, so I'm guessing you read it na, no? I'm assuming you paused the video and then you read it on your own. So basically, the whole point of this chapter, guys, it's a plot to burn down the chateau of the Monsignor. So if you remember, Monsieur the Marquis, the Monsignor of the city, he was one of the reasons why na triggered kayo ang revolution, because he ran over the child of a man named Gaspard, and then Gaspard hid under his carriage and assassinated him in his bed. And then they also um, killed, executed Gaspard on the fountain, where his body started like dripping and decomposing above the fountain of the village. And so in this chapter, the mender of the roads takes part of a plot to burn down the house of Monsignor, and they were successful. It burned down. So we will just finish this chapter together. Not only that, but the village, light-headed with famine, fire, and bell ringing, and bethinking itself that Monsieur Gabelle had to do with a collection of rent and taxes, though it was but a small installment of taxes, and no rent at all that Gabelle had got in those latter days, became impatient for an interview with him, and surrounding his house, summoned him to come forth for personal conference. So, guys, actually, we met Gabelle before. Monsieur Gabelle, he used to work for the Monsignor. Okay, so he used to work for the uncle of Darnay. All right, and because he was a servant of the Monsignor, the people kind of assumed that he was on the side of the rich people during the revolution. So Gabel is a servant. He's poor. However, he is seen as an enemy because he used to be the personal servant of Monsieur the Marquis or the Monsignor. Okay? Whereupon Monsieur Gabelle did heavily bar his door and retired to hold counsel with himself. The result of that conference was that Gabelle again withdrew himself to his housetop behind his stack of chimneys. This time, resolved if his door were broken in, he was a small southern man of retaliative temperament, to pitch himself head foremost over the parapet and crush a man or two below. So all of the people, as the great house burned, they kind of gathered around Gabel's home and were like, Gabel, more justice, kay you were a servant of the enemy. And Gabel was so scared, he was actually hiding in the rooftop na, and he was ready to just jump and kill himself na lang, because at least he would land on some of the revolutionaries and at least kill one or two of them. Probably Monsieur Gabelle passed a long night up there with a distant chateau for fire and candle, and the beating at his door combined with the joy ringing for music, not to mention his having an ill-omened lamp slung across the road before his posting-house gate, which the village showed a lively inclination to displace in his favor. A trying suspense to be passing a whole summer night on the brink of the black ocean, ready to take that plunge into it upon which Monsieur Gabelle had resolved. But the friendly dawn appearing at last, and the rush candles of the village guttering out, the people happily dispersed, and Monsieur Gabelle came down, bringing his life with him for that while. So, thankfully, after when the sun rose, Gabel survived the night. He survived the night hiding in his roof from the revolutionaries. That night they burned. Oh my gosh, I'm like so bright right now. Okay. I'm sorry, it's just my windows there. Good. So he survived that night of the fire. Good. And that's the whole point of the chapter, guys. They burned the house of Monsignor or Monsieur the Marquis. And Gabel's kind of surviving that night, which you're like, who cares about Gabel? He'll be very important later on. He'll be very important in the next chapter, even, which you will read with teacher Kara. Gabel is huge. She's very important to the plot. Within 100 miles in the light of other fires, there were other functionaries less fortunate. Okay, so the burning of the houses wasn't just Monsieur the Marquis. This whole plot, guys, to burn the house, they did this with several mansions around France Good. That night and other nights whom the rising sun found hanging across once peaceful streets, where they had been born and bred, also there were other villagers and townspeople, less fortunate than the mender of roads and his fellows, upon whom the functionaries and soldiery turned with success, and whom they strung up in their turn. But the fierce figures were steadily wending east, west, north, and south, be that as it would, and whosoever hung, fire burned. The altitude of the gallows that would turn to water and quench it, no functionary by any stretch of mathematics was able to calculate successfully. So, continued description of the revolution, no? This continued talk about how violent it is. So, I think the last chapter I read with you guys, itong the Echoing Footsteps chapter, focus kaayo was blood. More, that was kind of the main symbol, blood. This one, it's fire na. And then Dickens is so good at writing good because before this it was the sea. So the sea still right? The sea still writes. Yeah, so he compares the revolution to these things of nature, good blood, the sea and fire, to show how uncontrollable it's becoming and how ruthless it is good. So that's the fire rises. And then you're going to do chapter 24 with teacher Kiara, Drawn to the Lodestone Rock, which is the last chapter for book the second, okay? The Golden Thread. And now we're after that, we're going to enter book the third, the Track of a Storm, which is where everything collides and everything comes together in a good. And we're actually really almost done, guys. We have probably like 150 pages left. So I know we can do that. And these are very fast chapters because they're very, very intense. Because we're reaching na the climax, we're reaching the ending. So I hope you're enjoying it. Continue, good guys. It's our last book together. It's the last book we're reading together. And even though we're apart, I'm very happy that we can enjoy it together. So, bye-bye.